All right, welcome everybody to this month's California Apprenticeship Initiative webinar. I'm so glad everyone can join us. We are going to be chatting today with our friends from the San Luis Obispo County Office of Education. And today we are going to discuss a podcast series that they have been putting together called Hello Careers, which discusses the development process of their apprenticeship program. And the webinar itself unpacks insights that is designed to help others build partnership, garner public support for apprenticeship programming in their own communities. I think the idea is absolutely fantastic. It's a great way to help share out some lessons learned in an entirely new format, and one you can access when it's available to you, when it's most convenient to you, walks in the park, commutes to and from work, etc. It's fantastic. I've actually been listening to it over the last month or so. So before we get started, I wanted to make sure we're going to try something a little bit new for our new Zoom platform. And I want to give everybody a little bit of housekeeping updates regarding that. So at certain points during the conversation today, I'll actually pause the conversation and give people an opportunity to type in questions that have come to their mind during the conversation. We know that when engaging in a webinar or a discussion, or if any folks were at the Meeting of the Minds conference in Monterey earlier this week, at conferences as well, you might be getting a lot of really great content that's coming out. You have questions that you want to write down and ideas you want to put down, and you kind of have to decouple yourself from the dialogue that's going on at that time. And so as a way to prevent some of that, we'll put in little pause points for folks to be able to type questions into the chat as we're going. In addition, I want to give folks the opportunity to, if they have questions that come to their mind, if you raise your hand, we can pause the conversation and give you an opportunity to ask that yourself. So in order to do both of those things, on your Zoom screen, by moving the mouse, you should see a banner that pops up on the bottom part of the screen. At least from my end, it's the bottom part of the screen. And there is a button there called Chat. If you click on Chat, that'll actually bring up a chat box where you can type messages into. And your questions can go in there during our pause points, or frankly at any time as they come in, we'll make sure to include them. In addition, if you click on the Participants button, which is that picture of a couple of people, a couple of figures that are shaped there, that'll open up another box, and within there is a button called Raise Hand. And you can opt to raise your hand if you have a question that you just want to speak out instead of spending the time to actually type the question in. Feel free to raise your hand at any time, and we'll make sure to catch you as soon as is sensible during the conversation. So we'll try those strategies out today and see if we can make sure that any questions that you have get covered, and we have a robust and valuable conversation with our guest today. And with that, I want to introduce Michael Spicchiola and Dan Weeks from the San Luis Obispo County Office of Education. And let me give you both an opportunity to introduce yourselves. Michael, if you wouldn't mind starting.
So Michael Spicchiola, I have two as the Director of Career and College Pathways at the County Office of Education. I've had for a number of years. I was the Director of the California Career Pathways Trust Grant, that's familiar to some of the area. And I'm also the Executive Director of SLO Partners. SLO Partners was the consortium that was formed at the height of the last recession, which helped organize the Workforce Development Board, our local community college, Westa College, as well as K-12. And is that a little better? Sorry about that. And as well as our K-12 and business partners.
Great.
Dan Weeks. I work with Michael in the County Office of Education. I also wear another hat. I'm the entrepreneur in residence for Cal Poly's New Business Incubator, and I teach entrepreneurship at Cal Poly. My role with SLO Partners is being the business liaison, using entrepreneurial methods to run our apprenticeship program like a tech startup.
That's fantastic. And so I thank you. It sounds like, we have both of you who are well tied into the county, the education system, the university system, also with business backgrounds itself. So it's already a little bit of a natural marriage that's happening there. And you talked about it a little bit. Can you both give us just like a quick lay of the land of, you said that Slow Partners began as, it's a consortium that began at the height of the recession 10 years ago. And how does Hello Careers fit into this marriage between Slow Partners, County Office of Ed, et cetera?
Well, Hello Careers, as we started to have success with the business community and developing the apprenticeships, we really had to come up with a better way than just writing a white paper of working. And so sort of a dialectic approach, a conversation approach seemed to be the best way of getting these conversations out and really having a conversation about how do you develop career pathways? What is the business response to what we've developed? What's an apprentice response to what we've developed? Just being able to share our story in more of a conversational way. And podcasts seem to be the form of long-form journalism and appropriate to really share our story and start engaging in a conversation. Because really, our secrets of success is open conversations with people and for discovery approach to really identify what's the problem and what's the appropriate solution for that problem.
That's fantastic. And it sounded like I had a little bit of audio difficulty on my end, so it's a little bit choppy, but it sounds like, having the long form journalistic approach through a podcast to be able to communicate a lot of these ideas was a valuable way for you to bring out a lot of these challenges around apprenticeship and responding to the business needs in the local community itself. That's what I got from what you said. Is that right, Michael?
Yes, and I think one unique thing to Slow, but it may not to other communities, is we have the last hour in California, Diablo, and they are scheduled to close in the next 5 to 7 years. And so that's creating a situation in our local economy where the large employer is pulling out of the community. And what do we do to replace those really high quality jobs that are both middle class and very high paying? The average salary at PG&E is $1,000 a year. So there's a gap that to be filled, and we need to start working on that now, not later.
Great. Okay. So before we dive really deep into the conversation, I just wanted to I wanted to ask one introductory softball question to you both, which is, what is it that prompted you both to connect with this undertaking and to start the Slow Partners and begin the apprenticeship journey in San Luis Obispo?
So when I got funding through the California Apprenticeship Initiative, look at it purely as a grant fund. I looked at it more as startup funds for an ed tech startup. And so I went and approached Dan Weeks, who I'd had a previous relationship in teaching, as an entrepreneur of what's the business model for this and what's going to be the value proposition that we create that can be sustainable. So I really was going about getting the grant and working through the grant as an entrepreneurial effort.
I think what we look at as the grant is our seed funding. And our whole point is if you add enough value the employers will be happy to pay the ongoing fees to continue to run the program. And that's what businesses do. Your profit comes from value. And the idea here is the employers, and part of what we highlight in careers, we just added 3 more episodes, which is the voice of the employers. The employers can't get enough people from us. And that's how you know you're adding value.
That's great, and I'm really glad you brought that up and mentioned the new episodes that you have. I'm not sure if everybody on the line has had an opportunity to check out the podcast yet, but I want to give a quick little early plug to it if you haven't listened to it, so you can check it out. And Eduardo, if you wouldn't mind just advancing to that second slide also, so people have it in front of them. So the podcast itself covers a lot of important issues around building an apprenticeship program, from building relationship and communication with businesses, relationship building between partners and LEAs, and your apprenticeship committee, and establishing effective supports for the participants that are actually going through the program itself. And one thing that I noticed, I've been able to listen to, not the new episodes yet, but the episodes that have been on for the last couple of months now, and I noticed that there's a frequently referenced notion that carries across multiple episodes in the Hello Careers podcast, that of what keeps getting termed customer discovery process. And me, I come from the education field, and so that was a new term for me. But it's something that kept kind of coming up. And so I wanted to start by asking this idea that manifests across the various efforts that you both have engaged in. What is the customer discovery process, and how does that factor into your developing of an apprenticeship program?
So, Dan, I think the key for customer discovery is it's about listening and it's not about selling. So what you really need to do in customer discovery is get an open dialogue with your target customer. And to us, the target customer is the employer, not the apprentice, it's the employer. And really understand their pains and gains. What are their pain points? What are their that they have? Listen to what they wished they had, but you don't tell them, we have these people available right now. It's all about listening, and then you can come back in another session to say, hey, this is what I think I heard, reflective listening. And if I did, would you be willing to pull people in without 2 years of experience? Because I see on the system, all your jobs have 2 or 3 years of experience required. So we did that process. Everyone we placed in our first cohort, which was 28 people across 18 employers, the single one of those was a job posting on the system, on Indeed or wherever, for someone with no experience. And I think it was this customer discovery where they knew we were listening. We weren't just rebranding people they already saw, but we listened. What do you need? Part of what they wanted to do is, you need to lower the risk for me because these people don't have any experience. So what are you going to do to lower the risk? And a lot of our program was all about lowering the risk for the employer. And that's what we really heard from customer discovery. Michael, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think early on, a lot of people understand apprenticeship as learn and earn and the other 4-year degree. And that's a lot of messaging that's focused on the apprentice understanding their role in the program. But apprenticeship is not really well understood by the business community, who may be more familiar with internships. Mm-hmm. So you really define it as something very different from an internship. And what we found in talking to businesses was what they found attractive about apprenticeship, it lowered their risk of finding qualified applicants, and they were able to then customize and specialize the type of training that they want for their. So this of a multi-year program and a full and lower wages that advanced as you got more experience was really a piece in getting the business community to buy into ship.
Mm-hmm. That's such a valuable and important lesson. You know, it's maybe one of the most challenging aspects of getting in front of or building your message, certainly to employers, and I would suppose really just to about anybody, is how do I not only pitch this age old new idea of apprenticeship into building up the workforce system, but how do we remove the risk for that so each party that's involved can get buy-in for it? And certainly for the employer, it sounds like, you know, when you're going in and you're talking to employers who are looking for these open positions, who had these open positions that they just can't seem to fill, and they're looking for people to bring in. You have a pool of individuals that you could potentially train, but you need to convince the employer that you are good enough to ensure that that training happens and that those workers meet the needs that they have. So I'm glad that you talked about engaging the business partner itself. I'm curious, you know, in order to make your message or to make your pitch to the employer, you also need to find the right person at the employer. You mentioned that one of the local nuclear plants that are in your area is, you know, the last large employer that's getting ready to pull out of the area, and so there's liable to be a lot of need to fill some positions for some really talented people who no longer have access to good paying jobs. How do you find the right person at an employer that you want to engage with and potentially partner with?
So we really, hold on, I'm getting an echo here. I'm moving to another spot.
And that actually sounds much nicer too.
Sorry about
we
that.
both went on headsets as opposed to being on a speakerphone. So you're hopefully going to get better audio now.
Yeah, apologies on that. So one of the things that we did early on in the customer discovery process was really getting an understanding of what the local tech community is like. And if you look at EDD data, it would show you that San Luis Obispo is actually decline in tech-related jobs. But I knew from my own experience in working with people in San Luis Obispo that there were more smaller companies that just weren't going to show up on EDD data, that they weren't of a high enough size. And I knew from the startup community here that there was a real cry for people who could be software testers, software developers, IT support, a range of positions. So what we actually did was we used LinkedIn to identify what the market was and to start making connections. Dan, you want to tell them a little bit more about the LinkedIn strategy we used?
So I'm a nerd on LinkedIn. I have almost 4,000 connections. And the key on LinkedIn is if the person's not within 3 levels of you, you can't really see anyone. So one of the tricks in LinkedIn is add recruiters to your LinkedIn. You get their entire tree and then just block the recruiter where they can't send you information. So that's my trick to get huge amount of visibility on LinkedIn. And then what I did is I looked in San Luis Obispo County, all the people who have IT related keywords in their resume and all the people who have software development related keywords. And I got 174 companies. Completely different answer than the EDD had, because they focused more on the individual code that the company has. If you look at that individual code, Google looks like a publisher. But if you do bottoms up, you see where the people are. And then from there, I just totaled up how many people were tied to companies, and I started from the top of the list and went down, and then very quickly I had more employers than I needed. And then what I needed to do, going into your earlier question, Caleb, I focused on CTOs. HR often doesn't really know the skill set needed. Someone hands them that, and CEOs are so business related. The more I could get the person who really is looking at the technical hires, because our apprenticeship is technical, and really just listen to them. What do you wish you had? If you could snap your fingers, what do you wish you had? And when they start opening up with that, you start really getting their ideal situation, which again goes back to the pains and gains, but it's not the typical data set of where you focus. It really is, our focus on SLO Partners is the long tail. It's the small businesses are the ones that you can quickly make apprenticeship deals. What I found, the bigger the company, the bane of apprenticeship is HR. But with small companies, you shake a hand and you're done. And so, you know, we have 18 employers for our first cohort. For this second cohort, I think we'll be at 50. But I've realized the easiest way to build companies in apprenticeship is don't go elephant hunting. Don't try to get the biggest employer in town, because you're going to spend 50 times more effort than getting a similar number of emplacements with small employers.
And if you get those placements with the smaller employers, you know, and working those handshake arrangements, then you may find larger employers.
Big employers really feel the pressure. Why am I not part of it? And then there's a pull for your services. You're not pushing anymore. Great.
So, and I think you guys touched on this, but I just want to highlight it since it came over chat. We got one question asking about, you know, are you looking for when you're looking for job ads on Indeed and such, were you seeing the same job title, or were you finding general skill sets and searching out general skill sets?
What ends up happening in general is you have to look at what they've hired over time. And what happens, Michael loves this wording of the hidden job market, is most companies are always looking for good people. And that's where we placed our apprenticeship is, you know, they won't put a job opening that says 0 experience, because they'll get 1,000 applicants. The employers usually put it up with the requirements that are too difficult. And then what they did is they don't get any applicants. So I think the beauty in apprenticeship, it really is a pathway for the employer to feel like I can lower my risk, because like what we did in our first cohort, we were pretty good at marketing. We had 940 applicants for 30 openings. So the employers realized these are the top 4% of the local population. What they don't want to hear is you had 30 applicants for 30 positions. Employers want to find you're getting people who never would have been able to even know about my opening. But it's
and I really want to stress the idea of it's a hidden job market out there. And especially in this, you know, climate of really serious low unemployment. This job, you know, when you look at the job titles that are out there, people are looking for, you know, a lot of job experience that just doesn't exist. So there's almost like this wish list of what they wish they would have, these magic unicorns that companies are looking for, and it's not realistic. But what we found by screening for attitude, training for aptitude, we're able to present a really diverse pool of candidates to employers that they're responding very positively to. Especially in the tech industry, there's not only a desire for gender diversity, and we had 40% of our software testers were women, but it's also this perspective diversity that we've got people coming from very different walks of life and backgrounds that are getting these new tech skills added onto their tool belt in addition to maybe they have really strong communication skills and they got a liberal arts degree that is not doing them any good, or they had a strong experience in retail management, or they were really strong customer service skills working in hospitality or other areas. What we found was, especially in SLO, but I feel like this is throughout California, there are a lot of underemployed overachievers out there that have no access to the up and coming sectors that really would embrace those strong soft skills that they have. They will be able to teach them the technical skills that they lack. It's harder to teach skills. It's easier to teach technical skills.
And it sounds like you really kind of hit on something. If you had 930 applicants for a handful of employers that you had contact with, and so I wanted to ask, since you have, what I understand, having listened through some of the episodes on the podcast, is that you had these hundreds of applicants, and you were bringing in something like the top 50 individuals, right? Going through an initial training and then weaning that number down based upon the types of skills that were being taught and the spots you had available. I'm wondering how you matched the spots with the prospective employers that you had waiting on the other end, and how did you ensure that there were jobs available for participants that were going through the program once they completed their training?
So early on, we learned a lesson from what we saw up in San Francisco, where there were Symantec, Citrix, and some other large companies in San Francisco had wanted to work on an apprenticeship, but when it came time for the hiring, they had a hiring freeze. And so Dan and I looked at each other and said, oh no elephant hunting. And we sort of looked each other in the eye and said, all right, I'm going to play 25, 30, 25 or companies. Way, if one company says not interested, another company could take two. And we really set things up as long interview process for the businesses that we were trying to bring on board. We brought them into the training to share and pitch what their company culture and how they can, type of a job they were looking for, what candidate they were looking for, a job culture they had, and used short videos, 3 minutes of our apprentices in which they were able to share their story and really get their customer service skills out in front of them and really present their personality to the employers so we could match them. Dan, tell a little bit about our matching game we played.
Yeah, so basically we played Match.com. We required the employers to pitch to the apprentices, why work for me? And they could only see the apprentices that had at least medium level interest in working for them. But we don't want the employers to think this is charity. This is a huge competitive advantage for them to have these people. And it set the stage when the employers say, I have to pitch to the apprentices. I said, yes, because your competitors are going to get the best people otherwise. Mm-hmm. And it totally rocked their world, but it was a good thing. And then because we had video interviews in addition to the resumes, you got to realize most of these resumes aren't in the space that they just got this additional training in. But if you lead with the video interview, you get the persona, you get the person first, and then the resume is icing on the cake. And then, as Michael said, oh, and they also were a manager at an auto parts store. That's great. But if you lead with the resume and says, what am I doing with this resume for this auto parts store manager for this software tester? I don't get that. So,
and thinking about how you first approached the employers themselves, you went in and you were asking, what is it that you wish you had?
Yeah.
And then you're coming back to them with these candidates and saying, okay, here's just the short list of people that we've pulled from you that are now on the market, available to you, but also available to your competitor. And these are the people that we think are meeting the need that you say you needed.
It's a two-sided marketplace, and I think what ended up happening is, so we looked for interest both ways. The employers told us based on videos and going to the class who asked good questions and so on, who they most wanted to see. And then they had to have at least medium interest both ways to even have an interview.
Mm-hmm.
And then what ended up happening, our top apprentices got 4 job offers, and 3 out of the 4 they were able to say no to, which was good. Because some of the employers said, well, what do I need to do different? They're not picking me.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, here's what I heard. And then I said, I can give you some additional names that weren't in your interviews. And they came back, and then they got 3 apprentices out of that second pass because they listened, because all of a sudden it's like, I don't want to miss out here.
Yeah. So we had a couple of questions that came over the line, and I want to make sure we circle back to them also. And they're semi-related. We had one asking, if you can talk about how you first reached out to employers. You identified the 174 companies, and what was the nature of your first email? And then did you use the networks of a few people, or did you reach out more broadly? And just to piggyback up on that one, since we are talking about the 3-minute video pitch, also, how did you distribute that 3-minute video? So, a lot of this is about how
I love those questions.
Yeah, how did you get out?
So, first step is I did a LinkedIn connection to who I thought the key players were at the company. Just from my LinkedIn, I didn't do a cold phone call to them. I wanted to see, and I didn't even put any text. I put my title tied to Cal Poly's entrepreneurship. So I wanted to see who was interested in at least talking with me. And those were easy. Those were warm leads. And then I would follow up. And if that LinkedIn approach didn't work, then I would look for other connections to connect for me. It's like a venture capital. You're never going to be able to talk with a venture capitalist unless someone makes an intro for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can always have people make intros for you. But really, the key way to get the meeting, it's not about selling. It's about listening, how I could help you hire these people that you haven't been able to successfully do. And so that's how I did the process. And what I found, some of the companies were too hard to crack through, especially the bigger ones. I said, forget about them. And then what ends up happening, they come back later to say, why didn't I get any? And I said, well, you're too hard to work with.
And thinking on the video piece of it, how did you go about distributing that video to?
So for the videos, they're on YouTube. If you look on YouTube, look for San Luis Obispo IT Ready, you could see our initial set of videos that we did for the first cohort. But I would send them a subset of the videos. Here's 4 or 5 people that are representative of the kind of people we have. Because if I give them 30, it's too much work.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll give them just a subset to kind of wet their whistle and go, oh, give me more. And because then they can quickly watch some videos, and it's a good enticement for them to say, this is interesting. Can you send me more than just these 3? But you send them a smaller list initially. And what it would do is that it had 3 components. One was a link to their video, a link to their resume, and a couple sentence overview of the person and kind of like their unique skills.
Mm.
But the key is
Great.
unlike a headhunter, we're not pushing a person. There's a pool, and we let them pull from the pool.
That's great.
Yeah, it's not expensive to make the videos, and it's well worth the effort. And it's proven to be a really best practice that all of the businesses have responded favorably to, that they really loved being able to see a couple of videos before they make a choice on interview.
That's great. And I dropped a
That's-
link to a YouTube search for, you said it was San Luis Obispo IT Ready. I dropped a quick link up there in the chat so people can check it out later, or you can just search it out yourself later on as well. So we've been getting a number of good questions over the chat. So I actually want to push forward, considering we're already coming up on the hour, and ask a little bit about relationship building with the college side of the equation of apprenticeship, and how difficult or easy it's been to establish things like articulation agreements with the community colleges or with four-year colleges. And I'm curious, from Slow Partners approach and how you guys modeled your program, how did you go about engaging education institutions? Was your approach similar to that of the employer? Who did you target at the college, and how did you get to them?
We're in a unique situation in San Luis Obispo in that the community college realized they didn't have the capacity to pursue a grant, and neither did the individual school districts. So the skunk of the community, where our superintendent Brescia gives us a lot of air cover to be innovative and pilot new ideas. So we do a new and innovative of air cover. So in some respects, Questa, somebody to.
Michael, your audio is
Also.
breaking up.
Well, is that better? I hope so. So we were the risk takers instead of Questa, the local community college or the school district, going out and taking the risk. So we're still working with them to figure out how does this work, partner with them. 835, I think, is going to really help make things more easily with the community colleges. Already have really strong relationship with the K-12 system, over 3,000 student semester doing dual enrolled courses, most of the CTE pathways. So I think the opportunity is there, but I think the risk was too great and the funding wasn't clear for the community colleges. But now with AB, the greater opportunity, really what and that the business community wants, and make it sustainable with.
I think on the partnership with community colleges, the couple of challenges that we faced early is employers want the curriculum to be up to date. That's why we focused on certifications, because certifications by definition are constantly up to date based on as technology moves. Mm-hmm. A lot of the employers were concerned, well, those classes at the community college are multiple years old already. So what we needed to do for our first cohort, at least, is say, no, we're going to have the most recent curriculum. Mm-hmm. And we actually brought in the people who did the certifications. The way we explained our program to the employers, they loved it. And it's a pop-up university directly tied to employer orders. What they didn't want is, this is the program we've had for many years. The curriculum is not up to date. But it's good enough. The employers wanted to feel like, wow, you're doing something like an ed tech startup would be, is you have the most recent curriculum, it's tied to industry standard certifications, and you're doing it in boot camp format where you're quickly taking people in a matter of weeks, they're passing a certification. Then 2 weeks later, again, and the challenge with the existing 2-year AS degree, it's such a long process and it's such a big commitment for the potential apprentices. We went for, we're gonna go as fast as possible in boot camp format with the most recent curriculum that the employer said, these are the certs you want. And we'd love to have those through partnerships with community college to do exactly that. In our initial approach, we did it ourselves, because it just lets us get our momentum going. But we want to try to partner with community college to do exactly this.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so this is is this something that you see the colleges being receptive to? I know I've heard in speaking with other programs around the state that one of the best strategies for getting one's foot in the door at the community college level is to go in with a curriculum, or at least the skeleton of a curriculum that is really built around industry certifications that are already active, that already exist, that the college already may be teaching to in some capacity. It's just a curriculum that's older than what you currently have. And using that as getting the conversation started at the college.
Michael, you want to comment on that? I think there's multiple community colleges, just like what you just said.
Yes, and I think they're looking for their curriculum to be validated by business partners. And so that's really what we're able to bring to people in talking with community colleges. We have a multi-employer apprenticeship program with engaged employers who know what they want. I've run a number of advisory committees for software and IT, and getting past the base level conversation has been a challenge. That was why I pursued the apprenticeship. I gained more information over the last year and a half in working with businesses through apprenticeship. Actually, they want entry levels are than the 15 years prior that I've taught and had advised.
And I think the reason for that is with the apprenticeship committee, the employers are in charge. There's no academic senate. It's the apprenticeship committee.
Mm-hmm.
And they make a decision and then it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they love.
One question that we just got from Steve over the chat is, he mentions is the challenges that he has is having taught both in a boot camp environment, typically like a 5-day boot camp, and relative to certifications that run from CompTIA, A+ to CISSP, and teaching 8 years in an academic environment, the student ability to absorb the information, and it doesn't work well. So the 5-day format, other than the 5-day format.
Steve makes a great point. And I think what we've learned, Steve, is in our first cohort, we tried to do CompTIA A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus in 14 weeks. It was too much for most people. So what we're doing this time, it's just CompTIA A+, and then during the on-the-job training, we add the additional certifications during the 1 year. We did everything up front the first time, and it was too much for too many people. And I think you're right on. It's like, what's just enough that they have enough experience that the employer says, I'll bring them in, and then we continue the education over the year. Michael, anything you want to add to that?
No, Steve brings up a great point. You really need that differentiated instruction is the key. There will be individuals in any cohort that are ready to move quickly. How do you stay out of their way and let them move at the pace that they're ready to learn? Then there'll be others that they need to keep pace. How are you going to intervene and make sure that the learning is sticking for them? What we've found is really important. There's no shortage of content available in all different formats, but it's the community building with the cohort that really help bridge the gap learning, so that you take those students who are accelerated and are able to move fast. How do you make sure that they have the soft skills to reteach and and bring back to those who aren't keeping pace? That was a key lesson that we learned in creating these smaller groupings that were heterogeneous, where those would be able to lead, bring the rest of the pack forward and help create that community and really practice those soft skills and team skills of how you bring the whole team forward. So community building through the cohort really was something that was fostered, and that the apprentices themselves fostered amongst themselves. They were creating Discord chat rooms and having their own meetups with each other. The community building can't be understated in, I think, addressing what Steve is bringing up with of how do you get them the learning to stick.
Yeah, that's a fantastic, that speaks to another challenge. It's fantastic that you bring that up, because it speaks to another challenge that a lot of programs we've seen have struggled with, which is, in building a thriving apprenticeship program, you're oftentimes working with students, with a cohort who could really benefit from having peer support, a solid mentorship, or other program supports, things like even transportation or childcare or income assistance so that they can continue to participate in the program itself. And so I'm curious, are there particular strategies that you guys have stumbled across or have implemented in your programs on providing those extra tangibles, those supports that happen, above and beyond the curriculum that you're developing and communicating?
Well, I think it kind of speaks to the meetup culture that really is starting to influence how we're doing our boot camps. That it's part boot camp, but it's not a cram boot camp. It has more meetup type of a feel to it, so you can create that community. We just recently did a good comparative test that I think speaks to Steve's challenge. So we wanted to do a pre-apprenticeship this summer where we're going to try to teach 2 people how basic coding, CSS, HTML, and very basic JavaScript. And we had 125 people go through a 3.5-week online course that used Zoom, and they had paired programming built into it, and you would meet in sessions, and it was a very structured program. And then we had 75 people sign up for a 8-week, 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday.
Evenings only.
5:30 to 7:30. Evenings only, where we extended out that 3.5-week curriculum over 8 weeks and included an all-day Saturday hackathon. The difference between learning results was incredible. We got all 75 to complete it. We did a unique thing. We charged them all $399, and they would get a refund of that $399 if they attended 90% of the classes and took the final examination. So people didn't quit when it was hard. Otherwise, we were just offering a MOOC. And we had zero background in coding ML, and they went from 0 to hero in 8 weeks and scored very highly on the exam. Dan, you want to tell a little more?
Well, I think what we told the people, because most of them had no background, I said, I only have 2 questions I want you to answer at the end of the 8th week. 1, do you like computer science? And 2, are you good at computer science? And I said, most people won't say yes to both of those questions, but don't even try to answer the question till the end of the 8th week. Because what we did in the class is we started really slow on purpose, but I think the whole process is getting people to get past their imposter syndrome. It happens all the time when you try to get someone in tech without a tech background. They assume they're not smart enough. They have all these reasons they think they can't do it. And I think the more it's community, like Michael said, and we have these incentives that you're not going to walk away with from $400 just because it got hard, right? They stuck to it. And then it's like, wow, look what I just did. But I think most training that everyone gets in the class, as soon as that class gets hard, they're going to have a lot of people quit that class. So we piloted some ways to get you to persevere when it gets hard, because you're going to be so proud of yourself at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So I think also to kind of address Steve saying, I have a background in project-based learning, and so leadership was a natural fit for me to get. But all of our classes, it's very much hands-on learning and not cramming to pass the test. There has to be that delicate balance between, okay, do they know enough of the vocabulary and the content and the processes to pass the certification? But are we also exposing them to how teams work, how an agile developer works, are they getting enough practice in really putting these tools together so they can see how they can actually work? So in the 8-week pre-apprenticeship course in software that we did, it was a lot of coding challenges, and they would have to work with them, and they'd share what their solutions were. And they had to go into GitHub for the code, and they had to go, using authentic tools. And then at about week 6, we introduced them to an all-day hackathon. And we had businesses come in and judge the hackathon. And our goal for that was to give them that sense of confidence, that they went through the ringers, they worked hard all day, and they actually produced something with the tools that they got. And we purposely put them into very mixed groupings where the leaders of the class all had to play the lead on the team, but we put those teams, all the different, from the lowest end of the class all the way to the middle. So it was such a mixed team, so that it had to really about the skill sets of their team and come up with what was the project that they were really going to be able to do. And at the end of the day, so many people came away with really having the confidence that they could build something, as well as just how hard it still is going to be, but how confident they really were that they have the skills and they really want to do this.
Yeah, you're giving people an opportunity you're setting them up for success, or setting them up to achieve something that perhaps they weren't sure that they had going into it.
That's why we named it Hello Careers, because people don't want a dead-end job. They want a career, but there's a process to be able to realize what's a good career fit for you and how do we get it for you quickly.
Mm. So I know we're coming close to the end of the hour, and I want to just ask a couple of more questions and make sure that people have an opportunity to drop in any final questions that are crossing their minds. I'm curious, in thinking also about, now that you've been working on this for a couple of years, what have you found to be the most valuable, and maybe this was a question a little bit earlier in speaking with employers, but I'm curious, what have you found to be the most valuable bits of data or bits of information that you've gotten about the impact of your program or the quality of the candidates that you're working with, that enable you to effectively communicate the value of the program to the outside world, be it the LEA, the employer, or the lay population, future candidates, etc.? And is there any data or information that you wish you had collected from the start?
I think it's the phrase screen for attitude, train for aptitude. I think it really captures what we've found the business community is responding to, but I think it also communicates to potential apprentices just what they're getting into, that their act is going to be the key thing that gets them the training and the skills that they need in an ever-changing career field.
And I think it's ongoing. I mean, we had someone in the first cohort that was a very successful software tester. Now in the second cohort, she's going through the full coding bootcamp. She's going to be a software developer. And it might be in our third cohort, she's going to be a cybersecurity software developer. But the idea is, in my mind, it's ongoing retraining, ongoing education. It's not the old school, I had a 4-year degree 30 years ago and that's enough. No, in tech, it's like, well, what do you do recently? What did you do recently? Mm-hmm. And I think apprenticeship's ongoing recertification on something.
Yeah, and I think that idea really extends just about to any industry that we're talking about. There was a notion that came up when I was in Monterey earlier in the month, or I guess it was last month at this point, that was, as the population, as we become more healthy or as we live longer and we end up having careers that span 30, 40, 50 years, it's an absolute wonder why 5 to 10 years of education is going to carry us that entire time. It really needs to be a lifelong learning experience.
Yep.
Yeah. So I do want to ask one last thing, which is, if there was a single lesson that you would go back and share with yourselves, and I ask this in part because I know we have a new round of CAI grantees. Round 3 is up and coming, and a couple of them may be on the line today. I'm sure several of them will be listening to the recording after the fact. And so if there's any real learnings that you wish you had from the start that you have learned at this point, looking back, what would be that lesson that you would give to yourself to help you kind of hopscotch over little mud puddles that you've accidentally stumbled into?
Michael, you want to start?
I'm still thinking about that answer.
Well, for me, I think it's focus on the smaller employers.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about the employers. Focus on the smaller ones because they don't have time to come up with training programs. But the bigger ones will follow when the smaller ones start grabbing the talent.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And certainly that's, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Michael.
No, I'd echo what Dan is saying, that don't elephant hunt. As attractive to work with one, it may be to work with one employer. Running a lot of risks there, and you're only creating a program one employer. I don't know how sustainable that is, and pretty much giving them all the power.
Yeah, don't give them that power.
Yeah, that's an absolutely great point. It's when we invest, we diversify. When it comes to apprenticeship in California, we're really building a critical mass here, and to build critical mass, you need more bikes on the roadway. Yeah. So great. Well, I want to extend a really warm and appreciative thank you to both Michael and Dan. And I certainly encourage everybody to check out the podcast. I think you guys have something about, a dozen or so episodes are currently up right now. Is that right?
We have 8, and we just added 3 in the last week from the employer perspective.
That's great. So are you actually interviewing or talking with employers?
Yeah. We, the voice of the employer is so much more important than the voice of Michael and I, because our key metric is, do the employers brag about our program?
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah, that's the message that we're all trying to really tell employers to hear is, look what all your peers are already getting out of this. This is great.
One of them didn't want to do the video, didn't want to do it because he said, I don't want my employers to hear how good it is.
My competitors. Oh, that's a testament to.
I love hearing that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, thank you both so much. We will make sure to have this up and recorded so everybody can access it in a future time. I wish everybody a good rest of your month. Keep plugging along. Thanks for all the good work everybody's doing out there. And thanks one final time, Michael and Dan.
Thank you.
Contact us with questions. We'd love it. Thanks.
All right. Take care, all.